We are very pleased this afternoon to have with us, and I know you as Dr. Lennie, so that's what I'm going to call you. Lennie's actually her first name. But we are so very glad to have you. She works with Steelcase, and we are so fortunate, folks. She is actually located here in Tennessee. But I don't want to take any more of her time, so I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you, Lori. Am I on? Yeah, okay. Well, I just want to thank everyone for the opportunity to come here today and share some of our work. And as Lori, Dr. Lori indicated, yeah, I'm Dr. Lennie. There's lots of these shared with you. I went to Steelcase about 3.5 years ago from being a longtime academic. At this vintage, I'm probably longtime everything, but it was really important to me because as a design consultant, Steelcase was always one of my clients, and the reason is because they spend so much time and energy on research. Research is a huge driver for everything that they do, and so my work as an academic has been on how the environment impacts behavior, particularly as it relates to learning environments. And so this opportunity came up to lead this effort here for Steelcase, and I'm excited. So we're going to share with you a little bit. When I was told that I was going to be able to have the opportunity to speak to you, I started doing my own investigation, my own discovery, and started looking at some of your taglines and what you're talking about and what kind of information or where you are on sort of this idea of active learning. And you talk a lot about education on demand within your hands, which I think is a really interesting component. And then I went to the website. Now, sorry, I just kind of cobbled this together. But I was sharing with some of the folks a little bit earlier. I go on a lot of websites. I have right now a global perspective of what's going on in education. So it's really an exciting time because education is actually looking to what do we need to do to change. And I look at this and I started going further down into each of these different components. I said, holy cow, this is a wow. And I don't say that lightly, folks. You've got something going here that is very holistic. When you look at professional development, that's a huge piece of the puzzle. I will often tell my colleagues as fellow academics, we're part of the problem. It's time we were part of the solution. And so how do we do that? Well, I think you all are making some of those inroads, but there is a lot of questions. Where are we going? What does this look like? How can we make changes? The work that we're looking at is moving from passive to active learning. That is a trend. It's not going away. You know, sometimes the agency outweighs, you know, the ideas to sort of keep it as constant as it can be. But why Steelcase? Why would I be invited to come here? And I think it's because we do spend so much time really trying to understand behaviors. So when I look in this room, which is classic row by column seating, and I'm broadcasting today, which is not what I usually like to do. I usually make everybody work. So let's take a look at, just look around for a minute and say, if I asked you to turn and work with someone, I see, it's going to be a little bit tough, isn't it? First of all, look at how spread out you are. Now, environment behavior theory would say you're spread out because we're all territorial. We like our space. And how many times have you put something next to you so nobody else will sit there? Believe me, I spent a lot of time in airports, and so you really see this in a classic human behavior. So you're not friends yet. So something got plunked between you. So why do we do this to our students? Research will say that when we are in this sort of intimate zone of proxemics theory, E.T. Hall's work on environment behavior theory, we're already putting stress and pressure on ourselves as humans, because in the neocortex, our primal stem brain, that means that we don't know you. We're having to be crunched into your private space, if you will. And now we're already coming into a room with a fright or flight syndrome going on in our head that we don't even know about. So how the heck are we going to learn? Space makes a difference. And so what I'm going to share with you today is some of the work that we're doing and our why. And then challenge you to say, what's yours? We really work to try to help college and universities and other types of learning places really think about how do we reward great teaching? Because it's so critical. How do we provide for different kinds of effective and rewarding and inspiring places? It's not just about efficiency. That is a factory business model. Our architecture supports that. It's row by column seating, and it's double loaded corridors, because it literally goes back to the Henry Ford model. So what are we going to do today? Let me tell you, you better be prepared for who's coming, because these kids are different. Cognitive neuroscience will also say that their brains have changed because of these devices. How many of you came in here with a smartphone? Anybody not? Okay. When that thing buzzes, what do? Anybody remember Pavlov's dog? Well, that's behavioral conditioning, folks, and that's what's really good about these things, because they get us in our primal cortex, okay? It's behavioral conditioning. So our research, I love this quote. When I pronounce the word future, the first syllable already belongs to the past. You realize that we've been, since the 13th century, we've been designing spaces for learning in row by column seating? Is there any other discipline that hasn't changed? Come on. What are we doing? And then we'll always often hear, well, it takes a little time, and we got to do a little work, and we can't get there. I can tell you that there are places in this country. I have the privilege of working with some of whom I call our education heroes. They're in part of our third world country in this country, North Detroit being one. And this principal, Greg Green, you may have heard of him, started looking at his faculty. They were at a point in their high school that said, you're either going to make a difference or you're going to be closed. No money, none coming. No change to a physical facility, none coming. No technology, none coming. He said to his faculty, and I paraphrase this, what are we going to do? We're failing our children, and it's not just with an F. What are we going to do? Every single one of those faculty members got motivated to look at their tiny little, oops, sorry, did everybody wake up on that one? Their tiny little laptops. They went into a little closet, literally, and they flipped their entire curriculum within 18 months, 9 through 12. Now that's motivation, and it didn't cost money. That's change. That's change management and cultural management. Okay? It makes a big difference. Our research process, it's 6 stages. Understand, observe, synthesize, realize, prototype, and measure. The other question I often ask for faculty is, how many times do we allow our children to fail as they're learning? That's often an oxymoron, isn't it? How many times do we ask or allow our faculty to fail? That's also a big challenge. And yet the most innovative companies in the world, Steelcase happens to be one of those. We have to fail early and often to succeed sooner. So why isn't that built into our DNA of educating? I never quite got that one. I don't have an answer. Here's where we landed. We call this the active learning ecosystem because it's a holistic view. Pedagogy, technology, and space, or andragogy, whichever way. It's sort of a Kleenex term. It's all about student success. all of the work that my team does in working with cognitive neuroscience and learning research will say the more engaged a student is, the higher the level of productivity. Bottom line. It's the same in the workforce as well. There's a whole new Gallup study out talking about that as well. So we put P at the very top, very intentionally. If you don't have professional development to help faculty, and faculty in higher education are never taught how to teach. It's not the same as K-12. You have to be certified to be an educator. How many of you have gone through learning research? How many have gone through cognitive neuroscience? How many know how to put a lesson plan together? That was never taught to us as higher ed faculty. We're content experts, right? We come in and we have all of this knowing that we're going to share. So engagement is key to success, not just as a student, but in the workplace as well. Huge research spanning that entire component. So content today is just data. If all you are is a content expert, you're already redundant. Students don't need you. But if you are looking at context and putting it together and helping them understand how to filter all this stuff that's on the web in their only place they know how to do research or discovery, it's about helping them see the differences, understand, challenge those realities, and pull things together. We have a whole new different kinds of ways of pulling information together, of pulling disciplines together, creating new disciplines. Why? Because the transdisciplinary world is so important. How many of you have heard of the T-shaped student? Anybody? IBM, global company, is coming to different institutions and saying, we can't hire your students. They're smart. Their GPA is fabulous. But they don't have what it takes to be in an interdisciplinary global workforce. Why? Because they're long and strong on their discipline, but they haven't got a clue in how to work with anyone else. So the whole top of the T is the 21st century learning skills that we hear a lot about. You know, negotiation, collaboration, connectivity, all of those kinds of things are really critical. And so it's companies like that are going to Michigan State University, for example. I was invited to their summit last fall to say, how do we do this? It's not about just delivering content. So the question becomes, is space relevant? Is it just going to be an online world? Maybe. But we say yes. Our work and the work of others would say evidence-based design or research empirically based design, where they're employed, and when you want the face-to-face experience to yield to that engagement, it makes a difference. If you don't care where this university is going or this college is going, and you say face-to-face isn't going to matter anymore, so all these buildings are going to go away, then don't pay attention. But our research, recently published in peer-reviewed journal articles, the Society for College and University Planners, looked at students that are in a standard row-by-column situation versus any one of our advanced learning environments. And you can see there was statistical significance in the difference. And we have the article for you to look at as well. It was just quoted in U.S. News. Here's something that students' perceptions also yielded is they felt that they were going to have a higher ability to be creative. Well, if you recall Bloom's taxonomy, the highest level is at creativity, which is where we want students to be for that deeper learning, right? So these are important indicators, but we're not the only one. There's a large body of research now that's starting to look at space as a differentiator, and that's what we think is important. But here's the piece that we think, for what you're dealing with technology, it's really important to think about. The research yielding right now will say that the blended learning environment is a better way to learn for students. And the reason is because if you think about it, and particularly if you're looking at a flip model where you take a lecture and take it home, hopefully it's not bad teaching practices on steroids, but you're taking that lecture and you're moving it home, and that becomes homework. And now space has to be the doing place. It can't be shoulder-to-shoulder learning. It has to be hands-on. It has to be the differentiator, or they're not coming because they don't need it. So what does that mean? When you think about it, if you look at the traditional model of Bloom's taxonomy to the left and learning research, this is, what we're hoping to do in a face-to-face kind of situation, rarely getting there. In the blended model, the online, or the lecture piece, if you will, allows the students to do that repetitive learning without sort of being shy and holding up their hand and saying, I remember when I went back to grad school as a mature student, I had a stat class and I had a professor, and I don't know, the first week or so I'm in there, I raised my hand, she said, "I don't take questions in class. You will be talking to the TA." I'm like, okay. Down in my chair I went. It's like, oh my gosh. But the blended piece then allows for both of those sides, but only if space makes a difference on the other end. And if the pedagogy supports that. You've got to know how to teach. You've got to understand that learning is messy. Chaos rules. I've been fortunate enough to teach in design studios, and if you're going to do that for 4 hours to 6 hours at a shot, you better learn how to manage chaos quickly or you're going to drown. So this is really important, and that's why the blended learning model is seen in research as even better than just face-to-face or just online, because it blends those different qualities and those components. But we think of technology as both analog and digital. Again, the work that I'm involved with in cognitive neuroscience will say that we need to cognitively map in order to get it to stay in the brain. Typing doesn't do it. And so the iPads that have the stylus or the penultimate or those kinds of things that help you support your tactile component allows you to keep it into your brain and then refer to it, find it, bring it back. So you'll see that the vertical spaces in classrooms that we look at all contain whiteboards for quick, easy iteration, ideation, information persistence, all of that kind of thing. So what are some of these major factors? I'm talking to the choir here with the digital revolution. You'll be telling me things that I don't know. But it is faster and faster and faster and faster. Every time I look up what's going on, there's all these new things that are coming about with all kinds of issues. Cloud-based computing, obviously. But the social revolution is tied directly to this digital revolution. It's not separate, folks. It's very, very linked. And we think of our students as digital natives. They're not necessarily digital literate. There's a big difference between being able to text and kind of grow big thumbs and being able to know what to do with how do I really investigate something? How do I learn a new software? What does that mean? That's the literacy piece that we're thinking about. But we don't shy away from handing a device to a younger person and saying, can you help me figure this out? And that reverse learning happens. But as an educator, I'm like, well, I'm not going to give my content away. They might know something. Or they might prove me wrong. Oh my. And so many campuses don't allow devices in their classrooms. Any device. It's a threat. But sharing is a cornerstone. Again, it goes back to that primal brainstem. And if those of you that might be familiar with Maslow's hierarchy, that sense of belonging is huge. That's why, again, the Facebook, Instagram, Pictionary, all of those pieces that we can share are very much about that social connection. Again, I tend to spend more time in the airport than I'd care to, but there's not a person that doesn't go down the aisle that doesn't have this connected to their head. And I think it's because they're afraid to say, well, I can walk here by myself because I don't have to have my binky next to me. but we got to have our binky. It's really important. That's that social connection. Spaces have to change to support the social connection. How many of you know of classes that are doing a lot of teamwork? You know, project-based learning. Where does that get done? If it's a long-term piece, is it really going to happen in your classroom? Probably not, because most of them are row-by-column seating that were not designed for that. They're designed for shoulder-to-shoulder squish mode. And so we have to find these different places. Libraries are taking on a huge role to support those different kinds of connections. So again, what is the technology going to support that? As I often say, I think the most important technology in a classroom is a swivel chair. And the reason is because in a heartbeat, I can get my students to work together. And I don't have to move and clunk and do other things, but it's really easy to do. And in a 50-minute class, if I have to move a lot of stuff, and it takes 7 minutes because I ask you to move, and there's just chat, 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 chat. And then we actually get to doing something. And then they're, okay, now let's come back together. And chat, 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 chat. We come back together. We can lose 7 minutes. 7 minutes 3 times a week, you've lost half your class. Doesn't work. So the more we think about a lot of fluid movement, not just flexible. We think it's really important. The environmental revolution, this age group of students is highly, highly connected to this whole link to the environment and how it, Steelcase has stood for eons as being a cradle-to-cradle, working to be a cradle-to-cradle organization. This is one of the documents that I think you might find interest. It's the Gallup poll and Purdue University, Great Jobs, Great Lives. And they've done thousands of participants in this, and 2 pieces stand out. Workplace engagement, the word engagement again, and well-being. How many of you feel motivated to go to work every day? And how many are struggling? Don't turn around, Ralphie, no. Okay, let's do it again. No. It's a challenge. It's a real challenge. Well-being is a real challenge. And if you don't start being engaged as a student, you don't become engaged in the workforce, productivity suffers. And that's a big difference. I think the Gallup poll said only 3% of those interviewed in the workforce said that they have that sense of engagement, that sense of well-being. That's really sad. Lots of different articles are being developed. Books, Daniel Pink, Richard Florida, all of these authors. It's moving from an information age to what they're calling a conceptual age. So how do we support that? There's a couple of different ways. We talk about design, we talk about storytelling, we talk about symphony, we talk about empathy, play, and meaning. How many of you are aware of the Horizon Report by Educause? Yeah, I'm sure you would be. If not, I highly recommend it. They are a group of researchers that produce this amazing work every year. And it shows these different horizons of when technology is coming, and certainly the gamification of education is a high near piece of what's happening there. It's an organization that we are very closely tied to and really follow the work that they're doing there because it's so important. So we think about conceptualizing, thinking creatively. If you took a look at the class or the course that you're teaching and say, how do I have my students think creatively about this? Challenge yourselves. What am I doing? How am I helping them think about this? Storytelling, having that with coherence, with poise, with skill. How do I deliver the message? Design students are always really good because day one they have to present whether they're scared or not. It's not just about an argument though, it's really presenting an idea. Symphony. I can tell you in the work that I do now, it is a global workforce. I am a mobile worker. I do not work at headquarters. I work out of my home office and in a plane. I am connected with team members from around the world. Sometimes my days start at 4 in the morning, and sometimes they don't finish till 11 at night, depending on the time frame that I'm working with. Don't tell me that we shouldn't be telling our students how to work this way. That's the top of the T. And if not, the IBMs are not going to want your students. That's their criteria. Empathy. You can't know what's going on if you don't spend time in the environment where you're studying, you want to work, you're thinking of solving a problem. Empathy is a huge piece of the puzzle. Play. It's a whole lot more fun to play. Why did we take fun out of education? What happened? What were we thinking? Well, students are certainly bringing it back to the fore, saying, we want more. And there's an awful lot of research on gamification as well that says because we get this instant gratification and we get this instant feedback, not that we made the level, but we got the feedback that, oh, crud, well, we only got this piece of the puzzle done. Right? Right? It's non-literal. It's non-linear. It's messy, folks, and you've got to be ready for it. Because if you're not ready for chaos, you're not ready for active learning. How many have heard the term of constructivist theory? So what does that mean? Yeah, what does it mean? By doing, okay? What else does it refer to? Did all of you grow up in the same household? Really? From the same town? Constructivist theory's main component is that we all come to the place with a different culture, with a different background, with a different knowledge set. So I like it as a designer architect because it says, okay, here's the foundation. And we all come into that foundation differently. You can't teach the same way. We all take it in differently, so we have to think about that. Andragogy, or the teaching of adults, the main component was always you have to give an adult meaning in order for them to really want to learn. Well, guess what? That's been trickled down into the secondary education because these kids want meaning too. They don't want to do it just because we told them to. What's the why behind it? So it's fostering that interaction and connection. Student, educator, content. Focus on student learning. That's the paradigm shift. So we move from face-to-face plus online, we get these higher level of outcomes in a blended environment. Really important, really exciting. And it means then that space makes a difference. If you want to keep the campus, you have to be prepared to support an experience that's different for students. Or they'll come here, but you won't keep them. And that's factual. They vote with their feet and their dollars. Understand. Have empathy. Understand where they're coming from, where they're going. So we always like to say, we know we have campus master plans. Well, what's your campus learning plan? How do you intentionally think about all of the spaces, the niches, if you have a res life, you know, what is the student union being? What experiences are going to go on there, and how might design and space support it? So my team develops an applications insights guide that shares sort of our research clef notes every year. The fourth one's coming out soon. Talks about this rhythm of learning concept that we're working on because we spent about 5 years with working on library research. And I won't go into all of this, but you can see that what we think about is public and private spaces, whether or not you're alone or together. And so this then starts to get at a basic sort of blocking plan for design. Where are these kinds of spaces? How do we support them acoustically? How do we support them with visual privacy? All of these other kinds of things. And so what we've learned, our takeaway, is that you have to give students tools to manage their own learning. What we teach them today is not going to necessarily help them in their world tomorrow. We have to help educate them to be great learners. Because what we're going to do, we don't have any idea. So contemplative spaces, comfortable seating for long sessions. The rhythm of learning that we saw, particularly in our face in the library research, is what happens across the day, what happens across the time of a week. We certainly see the spikes in the midterm and final. We all know what that craziness looks like. But it's about all of those other times of the day. What happens to that student? How are they working? How are they making their way? Noise, collaboration. Some places you want it, the Starbucks effect, if you will. You want that noise. You want that collaboration. You go there for the buzz. Other times you need that solitude. You know, I need to go and have my heads down. What does that look like? Maker spaces. Huge conversations happening about maker spaces. This is totally analog. Captured with your iPhone or your smartphone, but completely analog. So whiteboard rooms, less precious, really instantaneous, getting ideas out very quickly. What does that look like? Again, what are the transition zones that you have to think about between the more active spaces and the more quieter spaces? What does that look like? You know, how do they self-schedule? What are those technological tools that can help them do that? When we think about engagement, what are the things that we can do on the fly? Quickly come together. Creating student content. Sometimes you'll find libraries that have practice rooms. How do I get that poise if I can't practice? Where am I going to do that? I used to stand in front of the mirror in the bathroom with a hairbrush, you know, to try to make sure that I could practice and see what I was doing. But you need practice time. You need to work with your team. Engagement, huge, huge word. Don't ever let that leave your vocabulary. You know, makerspaces, Google Glass, emerging technologies, the list goes on and on with what's happening there. And you can see a lot of the toys that are on these tables here. Again, lecture, event spaces, what are they going to look like? Exhibition. How do you show students and faculty you care about what they're doing? Well, where are those places that showcase that? It's not just about being in a digital world. It's about being able to experience it as you walk through, right? What does this environment look like when I can walk through and see? I've always wondered about lecture halls. Why do they have to always be so boring? You know, why can't we showcase student art, you know, on these kinds of vertical surfaces? We have 4 times the vertical surfaces we do a horizontal surface in every single classroom, and none of it's used. What's wrong with that picture? It's really kind of weird. Outdoor spaces. Again, incredibly important to have the view of nature, lots of research on light and learning and how that promotes it and supports it. So what are some of the challenges? There's just a few, not too many. But I'm just going to share 3. And the most critical, I think, is alignment. We don't ever act together. We don't ever act together in terms of design and space and how space makes a difference to all of us. The only time we know it doesn't work is when we're struggling with it. Otherwise, we're such adaptable creatures that we just make it work. But that's not really good design. Professional development, that's changing your mindset and your behavior. If you don't change your behavior, you're going to relapse in 10 days' time to going back to doing the same thing. Technology is tools, analog and digital in our world. But these have to come together. If we don't support behavior, pedagogy, and that change, technology and space are just tools. It's not going to help. So what's that alignment? Passive to active learning, if you believe in it, put the stake in the ground and put it on your mission statement. Put it in your, as it was talked about earlier, put it in your strategic plan. Because it's not there, it's not going to happen. Because you won't be held accountable to it. Right? It's not an easy path. If it were, probably we'd get there a lot faster. But it's complex. It's not easy. It's cultural by institution, as I see as I spend time in different ones. So what's your why? Why do you care about this? How do you articulate that? And then, what are the dimensions of how? How are you going to get there? If you see that plan, you can be very strategic about how you get there. But if you don't see the plan, it just gets wishy-washy and it doesn't happen. And then what are the dimensions of what? What are these plans and what are the tactics that you're going to have to do to generate them? So again, it's about aligning. We've had a long-time business model of bums in seats. That's our business model in academia. Now it's more about retention and keeping the students, not as much about the factory model of one to many. So what does this look like? The biggest tension I see is with the challenge from the provost academic side of the house, working with the registrar's office saying, what's the capacity in that classroom? Is that the right question today? I really challenge that. I don't believe it ever should have been, but I really don't believe it should be now, because that's not the point. The point is engaging the students in their learning. If we're just going to deliver stuff, we can deliver stuff anyway. You don't need space to just deliver stuff. So, what's the occupation? How do we do with that? What's the density? What's the room size? Those are all design components. How do we balance that? And there's lots of different kinds of things to do. We have to align. We have to get the people who are involved in IT. We have to get the people who are involved in facilities and design. And we have to get the leadership and the faculty and the students aligned in what is this goal. And if you're not aligned on a campus or by an institution, you're going to drift. You're going to spend a lot of money, not necessarily strategically. But behavior, we see different definitions, different practices. We see old behaviors in old environments. We see old behaviors in new environments. There's the District of Los Angeles County gave iPads to every kindergartner. I think it was something like a 30 million. Just money gets so big I don't even know what it means. Only 15% of those faculty are using the iPad the way it's intended. What is that? What is that all about? So there's a fear of change. But I think, like the programs that you're preparing for your faculty, you have an opportunity to get over that fear. And so again, lots of to-dos. What's the alignment? Alignment, alignment, alignment. Really critical. This is some of the research that we put together to try to say, what does this large classroom in active learning look like, for example? And again, it comes down to Bloom's taxonomy. The higher the level of students, the higher number of students, the more all I'm going to be able to do is just keep you awake by doing clickers or something, as opposed to being able to be engaged. But this is what we hear from leaders around the world. Attract, retain, both faculty and students. What are new effective pedagogies beyond just broadcasting information? What are they? How do we use them? How do we teach others? Who can we go to for best practice? How do we help students develop that top of the T, those 21st century learning skills, critical to their success? Integrate technology and future-proof that investment. Big challenge. Improve space utilization and keep up with demand, and then funding. Nobody has that issue. Right? Face-to-face has to become relevant. It's not right now. And don't kid yourself. Or you keep your head in the sand. Here's what we see. These are pictures I take all around, everywhere. And oh, by the way, here's some new ones. The paradigm changed? What is going on? So here's where some of the things have changed. Stanford University, D School. We were very involved in that project. It's all about maker spaces. It's all hands-on, all analog. Huge component. Quick prototyping, quick opportunities. Block School of Business. This looks like a School of Business. Whoop. Not sure if that School of Business does. This is the University of Windsor. How do we take active learning and put it into a large classroom, tiered large classroom? Analog and digital. Co-creation, really important. A total Mediascape Learn Lab, University of Florida, Design School. This is Virginia Commonwealth. This is their medical school that we worked with. Here's what we see in libraries and in between. You know, some of you have visited Grand Valley State University. We spent a lot of years working on prototypes for them as well. Again, every vertical surface that's possible, we've used. Because students like to nest. They like to gather. They like to create their own, we call it place making, and so they like to be able to do that. This is the graduate student library at UCLA, and it's all digital, completely different. So lots of in-between spaces. Let's not forget about how to design not a corridor. Fire marshals will get us from one place to the other, but we need to think about them differently. And then I asked the question, where are your students going? Where are they going? How are they going to have to live in that new world? And so this is some of the places. This happens to be Steelcase University. Maker spaces. So what's our summary? We really believe in this ecosystem. It's holistic, it's lighting, it's sound, it's all of these pieces of the puzzle. And we're moving from a passive to active learning model. That knowledge is being generated and discovered. It's not being just passed on. Lots of things that are challenging technology. No question about that. It comes at you all every day. But the paradigm is repeated itself over and over again in this spatial model, and we believe it's time to move on. So pedagogy, technology, and space have to come together because we have 21st century learners, but 20th century teaching practices in 19th century learning environments. So we think evidence-based, our research-based design, not only for product, but for the way people work in context in a place is really critical. And that will help you support education on demand that's within your hands. So I just want to say thank you. And I can shut that. Can you shut that? If I have questions, I'm happy to take that. Can we move that back to you? Thank you again. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for what you're doing, because I really am honest when I say from my lens and looking at your website, I'm just totally impressed, and I'm just really looking forward to learning a lot more from you all as well. So thanks for listening. Appreciate it.
Questions? Way back there, Patrick. On the way up, Dr. Lennie, what was the one thing that you told us at lunch was the first and most important thing when you're considering changing spaces or redesigning your spaces?
Oh gosh,
Remember
this is
the
a
thing
test.
about
I don't know. I say so many things sometimes I don't know what to say. I think the most
it was
important.
a caster's.
Oh, well, to be able to move. You have to move to learn. And you have to be able to understand what that's going to mean in a classroom. It's not going to mean that the furniture is going to be neat and tidy little rows. You know, you have to accept these different kinds of things. Yes, sir.
Will this presentation be available online, like through this? Because I would love for like our physical plant to see that presentation.
Sure, it's on their it's on their thing. I can leave it for you. And I think it's being taped, is it?
It's being
Jeff?
recorded
It's
right
being
now,
recorded,
too.
so, yeah. So
For our
either way.
president. So.
Yeah, we need to get the leadership there too, right? Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Wait a minute, Peter.
So we looked at the data that we have showed statistical significance for engagement. So our focus is on the engagement factor because it's there's a higher probability that if the students are more engaged, all the other stuff follows. So we're tracking NSSE, if you will, if you're familiar with National Survey of Student Engagement. And so our data was looking at how engaged are you between a standard classroom and any one of our new classrooms. And that's where the statistical significance came in. And we have that article, I think Bo has that article for you that was published, so you can see all of the research data in there. Yes, sir.
Could you share with us, you showed a picture of your classroom that had the 4 different spaces to learn, where it takes the professor or the instructor out of the stage and saving stage and puts them in the middle.
Okay.
After moving on.
So we have so the question is, would I talk a little bit about what we call a Learn Lab, which is a trademark application that is more of a square-shaped room. So up to 48 students, you only need one means of egress. A square-shaped room so that you can use the corners of room and not have it blocked by a door. And we have an X configuration in the way the tables are laid out with a triangulated view plane. So 3 screens so that students can be able to see. We initially, in the early ethnography, we spend thousands of hours in the ethnography to observe behaviors. In this early prototype that we were working on, we had casters on everything because we thought the faculty would move them around in that. And the X configuration, they never moved. And the reason is because when you want to build trust with students, you have to have eye-to-eye contact. You have to have that connection. And so in the X configuration, you're able to look across the other students and see content, or see each other, or whatever you need to do. So that allowed you to be able to do that in a triangulated view plane. And it's called the Learn Lab. Does that answer your question? Okay. I think, yeah.
Yeah, I have 2 related questions. One, whenever I just try to rearrange my room, I get nasty notes from the teacher after me about when you mess up a room, please put them back in rows. And the other thing is, it's pretty obvious just looking at the rooms that the folks who put the rooms together never talk to anybody who actually teaches in them.
Imagine
So,
that.
yeah, so the related
Go
question is, I guess, about culture change. How do we get colleagues to recognize this? And how do we even get the culture to change to where they look at the research?
Imagine, well, several loaded questions there. Let me start with this. I think it has to start with your leadership and your strategic plan. Because if it is a goal for the institution, that filters down to every single person to say, how are you going to help us get there? So that's, I think, sets the stage. The second piece is, what we try to say to faculty is, establish a protocol amongst yourselves. Either you're going to have the students, for example, if the students enter in an node chair on a chair in casters, it takes them exactly 1.5 minutes to rearrange that room and put it back in row by column seating if that's your protocol. I've had other institutions say, no, Dr. Lennie, we really want to see what others are doing, so I want to learn from it. Well, that's a protocol, but that's something that you all have discussed. So I think that's really important. There was another thing I wanted to say, now I can't remember what your third piece was, I'm sorry. But I think it's, how do you do a cultural change? Again, I think it's, I wrote a piece in a blog recently about the sandwich. I think it really takes leadership in order to have the vision and the funding, the support, the resources behind it, but it takes the faculty for the systemic growth. So you might start something here, but if you don't get the faculty on board, it's not going to happen. They'll outweight the vision. And so I think that sandwich is really critical for success.
We came to your workshop. I don't know if you
Oh,
recognize me,
yeah.
but the people from around the state came to your workshop
Yeah.
at Stillcase.
Uh-huh.
And we brought not just some of our faculty, but some of the people that okay the furniture for different parts of the buildings and stuff. And our VP of Finance, every time he walks by the room that I showed you with all the colorful chairs, he just shakes his head because he says, oh my gosh, they're not in rows and they're a mess. I just hate those rooms. And I wish we would have drugged him along to your workshop because your workshop, it was great. It
Thank
showed
you.
everybody how to collaborate and what the students could do in that space. So our admin people need to see that, experience your workshop.
Well, I can't be everywhere, but thank you for that. But I think we've reached out also to say if there is a body, a group that would like to go through a workshop like that with Bo or whatever, we can figure out how we can support that. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. To address possible concerns from a capacity standpoint, it's not necessarily, let's say a traditional classroom will seat 35 students. When you go to a more active learning environment, you don't necessarily have to only, it doesn't mean you will necessarily reduce the amount of students
Not
that room
necessarily.
can support, does it?
No, not necessarily, but it might mean it's all about the shape of the space, how you get in and out. So those are always variables that impact that. But I would say on average, you might lose 1 to 2 seats. But if you go from a tablet arm to a table-based solution, you're going to lose more, just because of what you're trying to do there. The other piece I want to make sure I share is we don't believe it should be a one-size-fits-all. So we've gone from all tablet arms as, the soup du jour, and it shouldn't, in my view, I know my boss would probably smack me, but it shouldn't be all node chairs. It should be a variety. And again, I talk about this because as a faculty member, that's where I go to work every day. And if I'm teaching a different kind of course or a different kind of class, I want that variety as much as my students do to keep me enthusiastic and excited and sort of challenged a little bit. So maybe I'll go into a Learn Lab for one class and I've got to figure out how to make my world work there, and then I'm going to go into a node or verb or whatever that happens to be. And I've got to be more cognizant of how I'm going to orchestrate the experience of my students learning. That's what it comes down to. That's a question to ask yourself. It's not about can they learn? We know they can. It's about how do we want them to retain knowledge and actually make knowledge. Somebody else?
If
Yes,
we
ma'am.
have a space that we want to redesign, do y'all have people that you will send out to help us choose what furniture is the most applicable for the space once we tell you our ideas?
Yes, well, we will, my encouragement to Bo and his team will be ask the why. We don't want to design just for design's sake. That's not the way we work. It's about really understanding and having empathy with what you're trying to achieve, and then we would say, well, maybe this might work or this might work, and give you some choices about what's going to support what you're trying to do. We can lay out furniture. I mean, that's part of the issue is I'm working with the architectural community to say, you have to stop designing, asking, what's the capacity for these classrooms? And now I have a template for that, and I shove in my row by column seating, and I'm saying, stop it. Stop, stop, stop. Because the formal learning environment is where the energy of education has to start. And so that's why I will say, we want to know your why before we design that. Someone else? Again, I so admire what you're doing here. I so do. And I'm so excited to have been here today. I hope you have a little nugget you take away. And thanks again for all you're doing for
Thank
students
you.
everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
you.